Today I'm going to build my first Italeri plane kit. This time it's going to be Italy's mainline single-seat fighter from World War II, the MC-202, which carried the moniker of Folgore in Italian, or Thunderbolt when you translate it from Italian to English. I really like the sleek look of this aircraft. It reminds me a lot of the German Bf-109s that just look like a weapon of war. I've done some of their armor kits in the past, and I really like how they think through the assembly and the detail and the ease of putting things together. The kit is a new tool molding from 2001, so the molding itself is still quite crisp and nicely detailed, and there was little to no flash. The decals for this kit were new from 2021, so they're even newer. And they do this really nice thing where they group the schemes together. So you have individual plane schemes in one section and the common stuff in another section. I really think it's super. This internet picture is of a Folgore on the dirt fields in Italy on a home defense after the Africa campaign failed. I like the olive trees in the background and should have a couple of dollhouse shrubs that will make a nice stand-in for those. Building begins in the cockpit as usual for most aircraft kits, and surprisingly the propeller as well. Considering how little the cockpit you actually see in 1/72nd scale, the detail is really pretty good. The instrument panel is enhanced with some decals, but the fuselage interior is pretty light on details. I did add a quick wash and picked up a few bits before moving on. Like I said, you're not going to see it. Setting the instrument panel, floor, seat, and headrest into the two fuselage halves is pretty easy. The location ledges and the pins are well laid out and make for really great glue bond points. And because the bond points are so well defined, the fuselage just almost snaps together. A little bit of glue and you're done. There will be no need for any puttying or sanding along the fuselage. What I really dislike is that the radio antenna is molded directly onto one of the fuselage halves. I had to keep working around and worrying about snapping it off and losing it. So it did cause a little bit of strife when building. The rear stabilizers and air intake go on next, and I decided this was a place for improvement. What I did was I hollowed out the air intake, using the point of my hobby knife to give the micro drill place to bite, and then a little extra thin cement to smooth out the rough cut. Italeri then has you drill out some location holes in the bottom of the wing roots. I think this sprue may be used for other variants of the WWII aircraft, but these little holes help you locate the radiator cover, which you'll find later covers up some other areas that were a little deficient. The wings themselves, again, have some good locating pins and a little help for some clothespins made for a really good solid bond. However, the same can't be said about the attachment points of the wings to the fuselage. So I ended up over sanding the trailing edge and had to use putty to close up this gap. Which, like I said, turns out that about 95% of this gap is covered by the radiator cover. Still, I wish the fit was better and more flush. Covering poor fit with another part just kind of feels lazy on Italeri's part. This time I tried a combination of Tamiya tape and liquid masking on the cockpit canopy and glued it in place using PVA. Then gave everything a light gray primer coat. Like I said, there was little to no putty needed on this build, and the gray primer coat showed that the little bit of putting I did have to do was good. It was fine. After that was completely dry, I taped off the bottom so I could get the base top coat color sprayed. On the rear fuselage, I did come back and spray a flat white so I could make the insignia band. I also took this opportunity to spray the spinner and the propeller, the backer piece, to get those markings correct for the camouflage pattern I had chosen. Then it was time to spray the belly color. I did not go out and buy new paints just for this. I think Vallejo makes paints specifically for Italian colors and others, but it's a light gray. So I just took 25-75 mix of aged white and sky gray and called it good. It looks good enough. And I started with a nice light brown color. It's a combination of various browns that I had laying around, most of it actually being a German uh, Dunkelglebe, which is a yellow brownish color they use in the desert. And then I added some other saddle browns and things to kind of make it its own color. Camouflage pattern to paint. This pattern is mostly olive green, but I felt the brown would be too hard to get good coverage over that darker color, and I didn't have any camo masking frets or things or decals, or it was just too chaotic to try and make that up. But I do think the belly gray and the brown top make a nice contrast. So if I do this one again, maybe I'll do it more of a desert campaign where they're more brown than green. The olive green was straight from the bottle, olive green, RLM 80. Not mixing a custom color allowed me to take breaks from the tedium of hand painting, and if I needed a second coat, I could go over it a couple days later and still have a good solid color match. Like I said, there was a pattern on the box, and I tried to follow it, but ended up just getting the rough shapes the right size and coloring in between, trying to leave about 40% brown. I did end up with some color bleed under the tape when I pulled up the white banding. All of it was a dark green, so that means that the hand painting did have another drawback. If I could have sprayed the green, it would have been a much thinner layer and it would have dried quicker and probably wouldn't have wicked down the panel lines under the tape. So what I did is I ended up using the painted white bands as an undercoat for the white decals. I think it worked out pretty good. Speaking of the decals, there are a few that need to be set. I tend to leave off all the stenciling as it's quite small at 172. It makes the plane look too busy in my opinion. While those set, the decals, I built a quick base for the plane. A block of half-inch foam insulation was glued to a quarter-inch rectangle of craft plywood. I did try to taper the foam edges to give it some flair. Not sure that worked out. This was then followed by a thin layer of PVA glue and light brown tile grout, unsanded of course. After that was dry, I just came back and added some green flocking. Again, after all the flocking and tile grout were dry, I decided to hand paint the Italian flag that they used during World War II on the two long edges with some simple black edges on the short edges. Lastly, the olive trees were added. Like I said, they're just repurposed dollhouse shrubs, but in scale, they kind of look like little short trees. Landing gear and weathering were next, and then it was just a matter of gluing on the propeller and the spinner in place. I kept the weathering to just a dark brown dusting, indicative of the plane using an unimproved dirt runways. And then the whole thing was just added to the base. Now, the tape and liquid mask did cause some fogging on the clear parts. I think the liquid mask was just on too long. Again, in this model, the fogging isn't a big deal, but if it was buttoned up, I might have some issues. Or if I had a lot of glass, like some of the German bombers have huge greenhouses, and I wouldn't want it to be all fogged up. Anyway, here's the finished build. I hope you enjoyed this fun little model kit. I know I did, and I will be going back to Italeri for other subject matters. This was a great build. And until next time, happy modeling.